Japanese history and literature are replete with heroes who have remained loyal to a cause, especially if it is lost or hopeless, and Lieutenant Onoda, a small wiry man of dignified manner and military bearing, seemed to many like a samurai of old, ultimately offering his sword as a gesture of surrender to President Ferdinand E. Marcos of the Philippines, who returned it to him. And his homecoming, with roaring crowds, celebratory parades and speeches by public officials, stirred his nation with a pride that many Japanese had found lacking in the post-war years of rising prosperity and materialism. His ordeal of deprivation may have seemed a pointless waste to much of the world, but in Japan it was a moving reminder of the redemptive qualities of duty and perseverance. It happened with a simple command. As he related in a memoir, after he went home, Lieutenant Onoda's last order in early 1945 was to stay and fight. Loyal to a military code that taught that death was preferable to surrender, he remained behind on Lubang Island, 93 miles southwest of Manila, when Japanese forces withdrew in the face of an American invasion. After Japan surrendered, thousands of Japanese soldiers were scattered across China, Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific. Many stragglers were captured or went home, while hundreds went into hiding, rather than surrender or commit suicide. Many died of starvation or sickness. A few survivors refused to believe the dropped leaflets and radio announcements saying the war had been lost. Lieutenant Onoda, an intelligence officer trained in guerrilla tactics, and 3 enlisted men with him found leaflets proclaiming the war's end, but believed they were enemy propaganda. They built bamboo huts, pilfered rice and other food from a village, and killed cows for meat. They were tormented by tropical heat, rats and mosquitoes, and they patched their uniforms, and kept their rifles in working order. Considering themselves to be at war, they evaded American and Filipino search parties, and attacked islanders they took to be enemy guerrillas. About 30 inhabitants were killed in skirmishes with the Japanese over the years. One of the enlisted men surrendered to Filipino forces in 1950, and 2 others were shot dead, one in 1954 and another in 1972, by island police officers. The last holdout, Lieutenant Onoda, was officially declared dead in 1959, was found by Norio Suzuki, a student searching for him in 1974. The lieutenant rejected Mr. Suzuki's request to go home, insisting he was still awaiting orders. Mr. Suzuki returned with photographs, and the Japanese government sent a delegation, including the lieutenant's brother, and his former commander, to relieve him of duty formally. In Manila, the lieutenant, wearing his tattered uniform, presented his sword to President Marcos, who pardoned him for crimes committed, while he thought he was at war. He was already a national hero when he arrived in Tokyo, met by his aging parents, and huge flag-waving crowds. More than patriotism or admiration for his grit, his jungle saga, which had dominated the news in Japan for days, evoked waves of nostalgia and melancholy. The 52-year-old soldier, a ghost from the past in a new blue suit, close-cropped military haircut, and wispy mustache and chin whiskers, spoke earnestly of duty, and seemed to personify a devotion to traditional values that many Japanese thought had been lost. "I was fortunate that I could devote myself to my duty in my young and vigorous years," he said. When asked what had been on his mind all the time in the jungle, on which he said, "Nothing but accomplishing my duty." After his national welcome in Japan, Onoda was examined by doctors, who found him in amazingly good condition. He was given a military pension, and signed a $160,000 contract for a ghostwritten memoir, No Surrender, My 30-Year War. As his story went global in books, articles and documentaries, he tried to lead a normal life. He went dancing, took driving lessons and traveled up and down the Japanese islands. But he found himself a stranger in a strange land, disillusioned with materialism, and overwhelmed by changes. In 1975 he moved to a Japanese colony in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he raised cattle. The following year he married Machi Onaku, a Japanese tea ceremony teacher. The couple returned to Japan in 1984, and founded the Onoda Nature School, a survival skills youth camp. Onoda revisited Lubang, the site of his long holdout in 1996, and gave $10,000 to a school there. In recent years he lived in Japan and Brazil, where he was made an honorary citizen in 2010. Hiroo Onoda died in Tokyo at the age of 91. His death was announced by the Japanese government.